Hey, in this YouTube video, I'm going to introduce you to getting started with SOQL. It's basically SOQL is a Salesforce SQL kind of language, which you can use to pull fields from objects, similar to how in SQL, which I show you in this video, you can use that to basically pull fields from tables. Objects and tables are basically the same thing. So basically, in this YouTube video and on my website, I show you how to create a custom application within Salesforce, and it basically is so related, and there's so much Apex code that basically you can use this on your mobile phone and work in an entire building with thousands of people and upload like 50,000 patients at once and assign tasks to thousands of different doctors at once, and in this mobile app that I created. So basically, I'm just going to give a brief overview of the objects. You got the nurses, the floors, the patients, and the hospitals, and they're all related. And before I go into that, I'm just going to show you the chapters of this book. So here is the book. It goes over like SOQL, it goes over basic select statements, and then it goes over relationships between the stuff, and it goes over like grouping and summing and basic aggregation. And it also introduces the data loader, which is a very useful tool for insert, upsert, and update mass records using Apex with Salesforce. And then also it goes over Workbench, which is a way to extract into CSV file all of the records and fields that you pull with a SOQL query. And here's the developer console, which I'll go to in a little bit, but this is where you write your SOQL queries. So basically, you could using Workbench, you can enable the relationships between the tables, and you can export CSV files. So over here within Salesforce, in the Object Manager, if you press Setup and then you search for Object Manager in Quick Find, or you just click Object Manager right here, you have all the different objects, and you have standard objects, you have custom objects. So custom objects all have __C, and standard objects, they just have their standard name. And this is the fields that you reference within SOQL. So over here, for example, I reference the hospital, the custom hospital field, the custom hospital object. So these are all the different objects. So hospital is a custom object, and you select basically the fields, so ID and name. So let me go over to hospital. So basically I select the name, which is hospital name, from hospital object, and then where the name equals hospital 2. So I'm just going to execute that. So basically it pulls both the records where it equals hospital 2, and then if you want to add in another column because you can't tell the difference between hospital 2 and hospital 2, you can say select name, and then you could just choose another column like count of patients and press execute. So basically you use __C for custom fields too. This is a custom field that I made. So that's how you can kind of differentiate between the two hospitals. So basically in Object Manager, if I click on hospital and you click fields and relationships, you can see all the fields that you can pull. Custom fields that you make have __C, and standard names, which the first field is always called name, and that's how everything basically interlinks. So this hospital here, this is the hospital name, but there are relationships between tables. You can have a lookup relationship and a master detail relationship. So on the patients table, for example, or patients object, I basically have a master detail that looks up to whichever hospital I decide to assign when I create a new patient. So say I'm creating a new patient, and I'm just creating patient 1, whatever, and then here I have a master detail which looks up, and I could select which nurse I want to assign this patient to. And then I have a master detail here for hospital, so I could assign a patient to a hospital. And then I have a lookup here, so I could assign a floor to a particular patient. And then you have the day in and day out. So basically, the master detail, it looks to the first column within a related object, and it just enters that field when you're creating a new record for the object underneath it. And you kind of structure in a way that, like, say for like master detail, if I were to delete hospital 2, it would delete all of the patients here associated with hospital 2, because master detail, it deletes any records. So I put the master detail column under patients. So if I go over to object manager and I sort by over here, so I go to my custom object patient. So basically I have the master detail on the patients pointing towards the hospital and the nurse. And so here's the hospital and the nurse master detail. And basically when you put a master detail on a lower object, that enables the object that it references. So I have a master detail on patients pointing towards hospital, master detail on patients pointing toward hospital, and that enables the hospital to have the count of the patients in the hospital. So under object manager, if you go to hospital and you go to fields and relationships, now that enables me to do a roll up count of the patients. So you could, when you enter a master detail, it lets you reference and pick from, and like look up when you're creating a new record in that in the patients, and you could select which hospital you want to assign the patient to. So basically, and then when you assign that patient, like that new patient, then this count increases by 1 or increases by however many you upload, because you could upload patients too. So basically the roll-up field on the related table just counts or sums, whichever way you want to do it. It'll count the records or it'll sum up a numerical column. And right here I have a floor. So patient 99 was looking up to floor 1. So what's different between lookup and master detail is, for lookup, when you delete, so patients was looking up to floor, so basically I could assign this patient to many different floors. I have floor 1 over here, and then let's just say like this is like floor 2. So I could assign the patient to like floor 1, floor 2, and basically let me just like delete floor 2 now. So now this patient doesn't have any floors associated with it. So how the lookup works is it doesn't delete the patient's record, whereas if I were to delete hospital 2, it would delete all of these patients' records associated with hospital 2, because master detail, when you delete the related record, the table that's underneath it that contains the master detail pointing towards it, it deletes all the associated records. But in this case I had a lookup pointing towards floor. So floor differs from master detail because when you delete the lookup, so the patients, they can have many different floors that they associate with, and they could be associated with the same floor. So basically if I delete a floor, and it just makes the floor null under the patient. So how the objects work is basically the floor here, I pair it with, I have a master detail for the floor paired to the nurse and to the hospital. So whenever the nurse has a particular room or a floor with a patient, you can create a new floor object here, which basically just pairs the nurse to a different hospital and to a different floor. And then when they're done, you could basically just delete the floor, and then the nurse will have the count of the floors assigned to will decrease, and then under the patients, the floor would also disappear, so you could switch the floor in that case. And I mean, with this app, you're basically just uploading patients for the most part, because the nurses aren't really going to change. The floors will change as you move people around, just so you could have a separate kind of data source, because you could build reports on the mobile app that have which floor each patient and nurse is on, if you're moving from floor to floor and managing the floors and making sure certain floors aren't overflooded with too many people. and basically the hospitals won't really change either. So you could hold like a million or millions of records in Salesforce on your custom objects. So basically you would be uploading patients and they would get auto-assigned to the different nurses, and then you could just pair them with the different floors and with the different hospitals. So that's kind of how like the master detail and the lookup relationships work. And I mean the mobile app in Salesforce is highly customizable. You could read my how-to on vbatutorialcode.com to learn how to build this custom app yourself. And yeah, so now I'm just going to go over SOQL. So to do SOQL, you click up here and you basically, I mean, what's kind of particularly cool about the app is the amount of tasks. You could assign like a task to like a nurse, a floor, a patient, or a hospital. And then, I mean, another point about master details, I guess, is so I put a master detail on floor pointing towards the nurse and to hospital. So on the nurse, when you actually click into the nurse and you click related, you could see all the floors that the nurse is assigned to really quickly. And then I also have a master detail on patients pointing to nurses, which puts that here. And then I have a lookup under activities, which is basically tasks, and that's pointing towards nurses, which also puts that here. So then on the floor under related, I just have the patients because the patients is looking up to the floors. So I can see all the patients associated with each of the different floors that I click on. And then I could see all the different, like a lookup is basically, if you think about like the standard objects, an account is a single, and then contacts is a multiple. The contacts has a lookup towards accounts. So each contact can be paired to the same account. So account 1 can have multiple contacts. So the contacts looks up to account. So account is in a one-to-many relationship. And in this case, floors gets looked up by patients. So patients is the one and floors is the many in this relationship, because the patients could get assigned to multiple floors. And yeah, so I mean, and then if you go to like the patients, you click the patient and then click related, and for them it just has the tasks which look up to the patients. And then under hospitals, you click the hospital and click related, and it has the floors because they have a master detail pointing to hospitals, patients because they have a master detail pointing to hospitals, and then tasks because there's a lookup pointing to those hospitals. So both master details and lookups create a related list under the object. So you could set it up in a way that you can basically manage your records really quickly, and you could also get a snapshot of all the details. And I mean, the way I set it up is particularly useful because you could see under the hospital, you could see all the patient tasks that are currently going on, all the nurse tasks associated with that patient currently going on. And then you could click each of the patients after you see them there, and you could see all the different activities associated with that patient. And then, I mean, you could go to the floor and click related, and there's really nothing assigned to the floors right now, but you could basically break it down by floor. And then you go over to doctor, and right now, like the let me just create a floor and assign it to like a doctor. I'll make like floor 3, hospital 2, doctor 2. So now under doctor 2, he's assigned to floor 3, and you can see how many patients are in the hospital. You can see how many tasks are associated with the floors. So I mean, if I were to just create a task now, or I were to upload a patient which would auto create a task, you could use the process builder to auto create tasks. So when you upload the patient, when you upload a patient, you could have like a process builder set up to automatically assign floor tasks. So you can keep track of all the different tasks by like the floors, by the patients, and the tasks they auto aggregate with the Apex code I built in my app. So I mean, like if you delete a nurse, that will delete all of the patients that have a master detail looking up to the nurse. If you delete a nurse, it'll delete all the master detail of the floors looking up to the nurse. If you delete a nurse, nothing happens to the hospitals because this has nothing to do. This doesn't have the hospitals doesn't have master details related to nurse. And for hospitals, if you delete a hospital, you delete all the records of patients that reference that hospital. Same for floors too, because both floors and patients have master details pointing towards hospital. So now that I introduce the basic objects, I'm going to go into SOQL. So SOQL, you click this gear and you click Developer Console, and then you click up here. So this will be your Developer Console that pops up, and I'm just going to walk through basic SOQL stuff. So I actually have notes over here. Let me just open this up and just take out my notes. So I mean, here's the basic SOQL editor. You click query editor to access it, and I mean SOQL, it only could pull out 50,000 records at once. And I mean, I introduced you to the custom objects and the custom fields. And I mean, SOQL can be used in Apex programming, as I showed in my Apex videos at 13.5 minutes for my after insert, after update Apex introduction video. So here's an example. So I'm just going to go over here to select ID name from account, and I'll click execute. So I'm going to leave the hospital management app and just go to the basic service app, and I'm going to go to accounts, and I'm going to switch to all, and I'm going to pin this view. So over here you have I selected the ID, which is a system field. I'll go over that in a few seconds, and then name from the account. So I mean, the name is just this account name. If I go over here to Object Manager and I click on Account, Fields and Relationships, so I'm basically selecting name, which is so you select based on the field name, not the field label. So under account name, I'm selecting this field using name because you select based on that. So basically I'm selecting these are, it pulls 12 records because there are 12 accounts, and just pull these two columns. I pull ID, which is a system field, and I pull name, which is the field name of the first column. So you could pull another field. So if I want account site, or if I want phone, I could pull the phone too, just by put a comma before the from, because the from indicates the object that we're pulling from. So we're pulling it from account in this case. So if I go to Object Manager, here are all the different objects. You pull based on the API name for the objects, and then each object has fields associated with it. So the account object has these fields associated with it, and this is a custom field, __C. You can create new fields and watch my Salesforce formulas video to find out how to create custom fields. And under objects, you could actually create custom objects, which I show you how to do in my Salesforce Hospital mobile app, and also in my custom object relations video if you want to work on more on custom object relations. So this nurse __C is a custom object that I made, and then I assign that object to a tab, and that's a completely different topic. So I'm just going to go over SOQL now. So basically, now that you know how to pull the fields and how to pull the objects and kind of basically what a relationship is between the objects, I'm going to explain records versus fields. So this is a single record, which is basically a row across. So account name, this has a single record. It has an account owner, a type, a phone. So all these different columns that you could select, fields to display, every single value for a single one of these across is basically a record, and then all the fields are each of the different columns. So now that I showed you that, I'm going to show you how to select a custom field from account. So I'm going to select ID, name, and this one from account. So customer priority was a custom object I made, and it was medium low or high. So if I go over to account, fields and relationships, I have customer priority __ C. It was a pick list that I made. So you could select a custom object from a standard account, or you could, this is a custom field from a standard account. That's a custom field, which is right over here. And I selected from the account object using this API name. So if you want to select a custom field from a custom object, so I'm going to do a custom field from nurse. I'm going to do nurse first name, and then I'm going to select it from the nurse object. So I'm selecting the nurse first name __ C, which is a custom field, and then I'm selecting from the nurse __ C, which is a custom object. So in this case, I'm selecting all the names and the first names of the nurses from the nurse object. So if I go over to my hospital management app and then I go over to nurses, obviously I'll have Dr. 2 and Dr. 3, and I pull their first names, which is just doctor in both cases. So that's how you pulled a custom field from a custom object. And then, so now I guess I'll show you all the system fields so you can understand where this ID field is coming from. So basically, here are all the different system fields, and here's like a description of these. ID is a unique identifier of the record. You could use it as primary key if you want. If you watch my Access Relationships video 101, one many, many to many, that'll make sense what a primary key is. It's always unique, and it can't have duplicates, and it's never null. And then is deleted, test if the record is deleted. So records in Salesforce could be soft deleted, and when you select something in SOQL, you can highlight multiple records by holding shift or holding control and selecting individual records, and then you could select delete row and then refresh grid, and it'll actually delete these same records within Salesforce. I'm not going to actually delete the records, so I mean, yeah, is deleted, just test if it's off deleted. You could actually restore records from the recycling bin. If you click up here in the apps and you go to recycling bin, you can restore deleted records. And created by ID, it says the ID of the user who created the record right here. So this field's right here. If you actually that's basically the user. If you go to setup and users, so I'm just going to select ID name from users. Let me just take a screenshot of this, created by ID. So let me go over to finish task, field and relationships, and this formula, click edit. So basically, like this right here was the ID associated with the user dev null. So if I go to setup and I search the users, there's a user called dev null, and this was the ID associated with him. So you could like use different formulas to to find out who the actual created by ID is. And then, I mean, created date has like the time, and then that T indicates where the hours start. So, and then hours, minutes, seconds, milliseconds. And I mean, if you go up here to your profile, you could change whether you are, if you go to advanced user details and you click edit and scroll to the bottom, you could actually change your time zone. So all the system settings are based on your time zone, and then you click save. But basically, that's like the created date. Last modified by ID, ID of any user who last modified it. So you can find out who last modified stuff, and then last modified date has the date and time this record was last modified by user, and then system mod stamp has when it was was modified by a user in automated process such as an Apex trigger, because you could modify records using this data loader and using basic Apex with like different triggers. You could do before insert, after update, as I show you in my Apex videos. So Apex is a completely different topic than Salesforce. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to select ID and name from patient. So I'm going to go to the patients table, and so now I have like so many different patients, and I mean Salesforce can hold like 1 million records, and when I delete the patient's record, nothing happens to hospitals, nurses, or floors. It's just I mean the roll up, like right now the nurse has 105 patients, but I'm just going to delete all of the patients, and so I'm going to select the top one and then scroll to the bottom and hold shift and then click again. I'm going to select delete rows, delete 105 rows, yes, and then I'm going to refresh. So it takes a few seconds. Notice how the rows are counting down as I talk. So it takes a little bit just to delete all the different records. But basically, now if I refresh in Salesforce, all of my patients are currently deleting right now. So you have to give it a little bit to process. So now there are 9 patients left. Yeah, so now all the patients are gone from the system. And under nurses, obviously the roll-up column, it no longer counts any of those patients. If I create a new patient, then it would appear under nurses under the roll-up column, because nurses has a roll-up column because patients has a master detail that's pointed towards the nurses. And now if I click the nurses under related, there's no patients there either. So yeah, I have the tables set up in a way that you can basically just delete all. You need to use the ID in order to mass delete from a custom object, and this is the only way to delete from a custom object. Normally you could use the mass delete under apps. They have something called mass, or under setup, they have something called in quick find mass delete, which you can use to mass delete standard object records. But for custom object records, you need to use SOQL to delete it. So I guess if you just need to like mass do something at once, you could do SOQL, and then you could do something like you could select the first name, last name is active from user. So I'm going to select from the user object, I'm going to select the first name, last name, and is active. So you could deactivate users, and you could use is active to test if a user is active or not. And I'm just going to use like a few different selects just to introduce a different like standard Salesforce object. So I'm going to go over to service, and I'm going to use this one from opportunity. So if you don't have like a tab, you could click here and then just add it over there. And basically I'm just going to paste this in. So here are all my different like opportunities. If I go to all opportunities and pin it, and over here I just pulled like 31, and it says there's 31 records, and I pulled the name and the stage name. So the stage name of the opportunity is how many stages it's at, because each opportunity has like stage 1, stage 2, and then closed 1 or closed loss. So you can move the different records along different stages as you complete the work. And I mean opportunities also have a lookup to an account. So each account can have multiple opportunities, each account can have multiple contacts, and that's kind of how the opportunities work. Accounts has a roll-up field that points to the opportunities amount, so you could get an aggregate of how the opportunities are summed up, and that's kind of how Salesforce standard object opportunities work. And then I guess the next object I'm going to introduce is leads. So if I click here, and I could select the name and the status from the lead. So under the lead object, which is another standard sales standard object, you could basically go to all open leads, pin it, and you got all the different leads, and each lead can actually, when you're done with it, it can be converted into a contact and account. So I'm going to go to converted, and you can create a new account, contact, or opportunity based on that. And I mean, or you could choose like an existing one. So I basically assign leads to queues in my inventory management video, which you could basically filter leads and move them into like inventory management. I mean, the reports are so customized. You could do completed or not completed tasks by floor in the hospital and stuff like that. And you could have like these reports on your mobile phone. So if you go over here, I'm going to skip product and price book, but product stores info about the products available in an organization, and price book stores info on different prices of products. And you could use price book entry is another object that stores the list of the price of the product under the price book 2 object and the price book entry object. So I'm not going to go over those objects because I feel like my hospital stuff is way better. So you could use aliases in SOQL. So over here you can select you basically use an alias, so it's shorthand for account, and you could reference it as ACCT, and you put it before the field names. If you're working with multiple, like ID is the field, name is the field, and then you could just reference the table like that. And then over here, let me select the first name and the last name from the contact table, and from account where the account name equals infallible. So under, let me go to contacts. So basically I have no accounts on the contacts table that point to infallible, but if I did, it would return something. So I'm going to do n as the last name, and I'm just going to point it to a new account. I'm just going to call this account infallible, and that's the only required field there. I'm going to click save, and I have all the required fields on this contact, so I'm going to click save. And basically now I have one field, one contact pointing towards infallible. So now the SOQL, if I click execute and refresh, now I just pull this, I pull the contact, I pull first name, last name from contact where account dot name equals infallible. So if I select fields to display, I mean, you can do like first name and last name. They're not shown on this table, but the data is still there. And I mean, I could just pull all of the contacts that are related to account. So that's what you do with that SOQL. And then I guess in this you could do like where with the value. So I'm going to select the first name and last name from the contact table, and then you could use where to filter your results. So you could say where last name equals bond, and use a single quote there to designate that it's a text value and you just want the value. So in the contacts table, I only have one person whose last name is Bond, and it's this guy right here. So it pulls John Bond, and that's how that works. And you could do where it's not equal to null. So I select the first name and the last name from contact where the first name isn't equal to null. So basically all of these first names, this returns 20 records. I have 21 contact records right here. And it doesn't return this one because this one doesn't have a first name. So that's how that works. And then like the exclamation point equals, so it's where it's not equal to null. That's a exclamation point. That's what that operator is. And here is you can pull like a not equal to bond. So I just pull all the records where it's not equal to bond. which is basically the same records. You could use like a less than or equal to example. So you could say the name and the amount from opportunity where the amount is less than 1,000, less than or equal to. That's how you do less than or equal to. This is how you do greater than or equal to. And then this is how you do greater than. This is how you do less than. And then you have like a like example. So basically you could do like select name, amount from opportunity where the last name is like test. So the first 4 characters have to be test, and then percentage means any character after can be fine. So it could be test 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like unlimited amount of characters afterwards, as long as the first 4 characters are test. But if you just want test and then a single character, you could do an underscore, and that just does a single character after test. And then if you want a single character before test and after test, you could do it like that. And then if you just want anywhere that has test, anywhere in the name, you could do that. And then if you want a single character before test, and then any characters after, you could do that. So that's how the like works. And you could use an in, so it could equal just those 4 values. So I select the first name, last name from the contact table, where the first name is either one of, it could be any of these, and then it'll return it. So, and then not in, it returns all of the first names and last names that the first name isn't equal to those names. And then the logical, you could do an and. So with an and, you need to basically like the amount has to be greater than 1,000 and less than 100,000. So both of these conditions, so the where the amount is greater than 1,000 and the amount is less than 1,000, so both of these have to be true in order for it to pull the record. And then you could use, like here is an or example. So in this case, either of these need to be true. So either the name has to equal infallible, or the name has to equal infallible techno. And then if either of these are true, then it will return the record. And then here is like an order by, so you could like sort stuff. So you select the name and the amount from opportunity object, and then you order by the name ascending. So it puts the name in alphabetical order. And then here's how you could do alphabetical order backwards. And then let me go over, I guess, relationships. So basically, lookups, they let you look up multiple values from another table, and each account can have many contacts. Every new contact you can create can be paired with the same account. And master detail lets you look up multiple values from another table. Required, unlike lookups aren't required. And master detail enables rollup on summary on some other related table for values on this table. Every new patient or floor you create can be paired with a nurse or hospital. Nurse and hospital objects can also have rollups, such as number of patients assigned to a doctor, number of floors in the hospital the nurse is associated with. If you delete the master, such as the hospital or the nurse, the related records on the patients and the floors tables are deleted. If you delete the floor, it just makes the record null on any patients that are looking up to that particular value. And so if you want to look up all the different relationships for current objects, you go to sharing settings. So I'm going to click here and go up to setup, and then search up sharing settings. And I'm going to click here, and you can see all the different standard objects. So opportunity has public read write, it's private, and you can see all the different standard like sharing settings for each of the different objects. And floor is controlled by parent, and like hospital is public read write. Patient is controlled by parent. So anything that has a master detail in it is controlled by the parent. And then, so that's what the sharing settings are. And contacts controlled by parent because it has a lookup to account. And I mean, that's like the sharing settings. And I mean, may do a one of these. So you select the ID, the name, and then you select the ID name from contacts from account. So what this does is it pulls all the different accounts. So here's like the infallible here, and then it just has one ID and one name associated with it. And then this one has, as you can see by the comma, it has two IDs and names associated with it. Actually 3. So yeah, you can see like how many different names and IDs are associated with stuff. And then later on, like you could do more advanced stuff with it, which I don't know how to do yet. So I mean, you could also over here, you could select you could select the ID, the name, select ID name from patients. So for my patients object, it has the master detail to the hospital. So this is how you select all of the IDs and names from the patients related to the hospital. So here are all my hospitals, and I don't have any patients currently assigned to any of the hospitals. So if I go to hospital and I go to hospitals, I currently have 0 patients in the hospital, so I don't have any patients at all. So if I go to patient, I'll just like create a patient and I'll assign them to a hospital and a floor, and I'll click save. So now I have 1 patient in the hospital, and because I deleted them all. And now if I click refresh grid, obviously I have this 1 patient over there, and this is like the ID that you could use if like you wanted to upload, because like, so you go to patients, and so this ID is the ID of the hospital if you wanted to upload to this hospital, or if you wanted to upload to this hospital. And you just use __R for the tables that have the master detail, and __C for the custom objects that don't have the master detail, that get referenced by the master detail. And also if I go over to Object Manager and I go over to Patient, Fields and Relationships, and I go over to the master detail for hospital. So this child relationship name, this is the name that you use over here for the master detail. So you use whatever you enter here for child relationship name. And then, for example, under like under hospital, page and relationships, obviously I don't have like any master details on here, and I just know just because the master detail is on patients that I'm referencing the relationship between them. But if you want to use a lookup, because I have on the patients, I have a lookup to the floor. If you want to do a lookup, you could just go over to the object that has the lookup. So under floor, I don't have anything, but under patients, I have a lookup to the floor right here. So if I click floor, and under here, I have the child relationship is patients. So that's how you get the child relationship for a lookup. It's the same thing as master detail, and it's just a child relationship name. And I guess like under account, let me click account, fields and relationships. I guess I could go to contact, because contact has a lookup to the accounts. So under, it has a lookup to the account right here. So here's the child relationship for contacts looking up to accounts, because under like the contacts table, if you add a new contact over here, you can basically search up an account and then select it. And So I guess other SOQL thing is include and exclude operators are for filtering the multi-picklist fields, which I review in my Salesforce for Dummies Part 2 video at 21 minutes and 20 seconds and in my Salesforce Formulas video at 37 minutes. This multi-select picklist field in Salesforce allows users to select more than one value from the list of values provided. Picklists are a data type for fields that allow for a specific selection of values from a list box to fill in a value. Using record types, so if I go over to Object Manager and under nurses, if I go to record types, you can actually control which page layout each picklist is assigned to as in regards to user profiles. So you can make different picklists have different values for different users. You could have like the page layout set up to have a different picklist on it using record types. But if you want to customize different picklists, which is different obviously, but then what I just said was if you want a page layout assigned to a user profile with different fields on it, you use record types. But if you want to customize a particular picklist, because I mean you make a picklist in here, so under fields and relationships you could create a picklist multi or a picklist, and picklist multi lets you select multiple values, picklist lets you select a single value. But if I go over to setup and I type in picklist value sets, you can create a picklist here, and you basically do whatever, and then you enter in your values. Like you could do like currency, currency, and currency, or you could display alphabetically, click save, and the values you select here I have under nurses, for example. So a lot of the specialties for nurses are the same, and so you could basically click in, this is a multi-picklist, and then hold control, and then you could select multiple. So it allows for multiple within here, and I mean it's pretty useful if you do that, because I mean, let me go to, I guess, floors or hospital. So under hospitals, under nurse specialized, I could see all different specialties from like multi-value pick list. So I could see how like any patients on this floor or in this hospital can be paired a little bit quicker using like the multi-value pick list. And I mean, you could like pick lists and multi-select pick lists to be dependent on one another. So you could have one pick list choice affect the values that can be picked in another pick list. So not only can you change which pick lists appear for which users and customize what appears in each of the pick lists and select multiple values for the pick list, but you select one pick list value and then the other pick list is filled based on that value. So you could have like the dependent field and the controlling field. So pick list normal, not multi, can be put in controlling fields or dependent fields, and pick list multi can only be put under dependent fields. And pick list is pick val only works with the pick list function, not the multi-pick list function. So you can watch my Salesforce Formulas video if you want to learn more about that. And I mean, here's like an includes. So I'm going to go over here and basically you select the name and the nurse specialized from the nurse, where the nurse specializes includes brain surgery or 2. So if any of these are included, then it'll return that. So that's how that works. So the includes, it's kind of the same as in, except it has to be any of them, and it's within a multi-pick list. And then this is excludes and includes both just work with multi-pick lists. So if you need to pull values from multi-pick lists, you can do that too. And then date literals. So this guy has like all these different tables for date literals. So you can select the ID, the name, date started from the nurse object, where the date started equals yesterday. So I have one record for a nurse that started yesterday, and you could basically do yesterday, you could do today, you could do last week, this week, next week, last month, etc. And then over here he has certain days, so you could just use n as however many days you want, and next however many days you want, years, quarters, etc. So that's how you do that. You basically just fill it in however he has it in those tables that I just showed you, and I mean, you could use a group by rollup. So I'm going to do a group by rollup SOQL. So I did select the name and the count of the nurse first name, and it counts from nurse underscore C group by rollup name. So I have two doctors with like I have Doctor 3, Doctor 2, and then I count the first name for Doctor 3 and Doctor 2, and it rolls up by the name. So if I happen to have like a Doctor 3 named twice, like with the same first name, it basically rolls up by like the name. And that's not really a good explanation of that, but let's see, this next one probably is a good explanation. It makes sense to me, so I don't really care. So you select the first name, sum open nurse tasks, sums from the nurse, group by rollup nurse first name. So basically under nurse, I have two, how this works is I have I select the nurse first name, which is here, and then I sum the open nurse tasks, which is here, and I sum from the nurse object, and I group by the rollup of the first name. So the first names in these doctors happen to be the same name. So being that they're the same name, it sums up all the open tasks under a doctor. If this doctor's name happened to be Doctor 2 instead, and I click save, and then I do this, it changes a little bit, because now doctor just has 1, and then Doctor 2 has 4, and then this 5 under here just sums up everything. So that's how that works. And under this one, I'll click execute. So you have like hospitals. You select the name and the count of the nurses in the hospital. So I'll go over to hospitals, and this one works because it's like you select the name, the sum, the count of the nurses in the hospital, which is the count of the nurses on floors. This is the field name of this field. This is the field label. So sums from hospital group by the name. So obviously hospital 2 has 1 nurse in it, even though there are 2 hospitals, and then hospital 3 has 1 nurse in it. So if I actually go to a floor and I assign another nurse to hospital 2, like I'll just assign them to hospital, or I'll assign them to hospital 3. So I'll go to floors, and I'll be like floor for hospital 3, and there. And then I'll just click refresh. Obviously hospital 3 now has 2, so the sum is 3. So that's how that works. And then over here, you could have a group by with multiple. Let me click execute. So for this one, I have under hospitals, I have the name, the state, the sum, the count of the nurses in the hospital, and sums from hospital object, and you group by the name and the state. So basically hospital 2 is in California and New Jersey, and this sums up the count of the nurses in the hospitals by the state, by the hospital. So hospital 2 has 1, and has 1 in California, 1 in New Jersey, and then hospital 3 has 2 in California, and that's how that works. And I mean, you use for reference and for view to get when a field was last viewed and fields were last referenced by SOQL. I'm sure you could use that to like somehow incorporate like time stamped in for your day or something. And then go to execute over here, and you could do like select state from grouping state, and state grouping alias, hospital, and basically this just sums everything up here. So it counts the total number of IDs. You have 1 country, so I have only United States. I have 2 different states, California, and it just counts the total. And then you have 1 country for California, and California appears twice. And then you have 1 country for New Jersey, and New Jersey only appears once. So that's how that works. And yeah, thanks for watching my video.